Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to participate in this webinar. Today we're going to talk about cartonization, key to reducing unexpected DIM fees and waste. My name is Bob Malley. I'm Managing Director of PeerBridge. PeerBridge is a parcel TMS software development company, and we've been working with cartonization for the last couple of years, and just wanted to share with you our findings and what we find interesting about it and how it can help companies reduce costs. Okay, let's get started. We'll start. If you're like me, you've probably had the experience I had a few weeks ago when I ordered toner cartridges online. A few days later, a UPS truck pulled up and took a driver walked up to the door with a fairly good-sized box, and I thought, oh, they sent me a printer as well as the cartridges. Well, lo and behold, turned out the box was mostly filled with filler, and knocking around at the bottom of the box was the toner cartridge. And for me, I thought, what a waste! What a dumb way of packing an order. And I guess if you're like me, you probably had the same experience. But the only people who hate waste more than maybe I do or consumers do are the carriers themselves. If you think of a carrier, they're almost like with their assets. They're almost like a hotel. They want to maximize the use of their space because space equals money. So as e-commerce has driven volumes at increasing pace, there's demand is outpacing supply, and carriers are really scrambling to find ways of delivering all the packages that they're receiving. So in 2015, after the Christmas rush, Fred Smith famously went on a rant during a investor meeting he had online, and was talking about how poorly packed some of the packages that they were delivering were, and how light they were in relationship to their size, and how that contributed to their not being able to deliver packages during the 2015 holiday season. And UPS had a similar problem. Well, coming out of that, the carriers kind of responded and said, "Listen, we're not going to, be delivering as much air. If we're going to deliver the air, we at least want to get paid for it." So they immediately started expanding their dim weight formula so the carriers would take into account that space and make customers pay for it. So there was a windfall after that change. They made about $100 million more than they had made in the previous year on DIM fees. So it wasn't a bad decision on their part. For shippers, it led to a bunch of surprises. Once they got their bills, they compared it to what they expected to pay as compared to what they actually had to pay, and they started to see more differences. And that's because of the expansion of the DIM fee program. So the way, for those of you who don't know how DIM fees are calculated, is the greater of actual weight or the DIM weight. And the DIM weight is calculated as by length times width times height divided by a DIM divisor, DIM factor. And so the lower the DIM factor, obviously the greater the weight will be. So today, DIM factor for UPS and FedEx Ground is 139. In the past, prior to 2011, it was 194. So you can see how over the years the DIM factor has decreased, and so the scope of packages that are falling into DIM weight is increasing. So you're more likely than ever to get DIMmed unless you take steps to prevent to prevent it. So why should you care? Well, first of all, you're more likely to pay than ever to pay an air tax or DIM fee for uncontrolled packing. So obviously, excessive packaging, and package fill adds to unnecessary and unexpected costs. There's waste. There's damage. If you pack within a box that's too big, your goods are likely to rattle around and be damaged. And there's a cost factor. Obviously transportation costs, particularly if you're in an e-commerce business, can put you at a great competitive disadvantage. So, it's more important than ever not to overpay. And of course, as I mentioned, customers hate receiving air. You've got to deal with all the packaging. You've got to take it to the dump, and it just doesn't look good for your brand. So, what does that mean? 5 tips for cost-effective packaging. First off, avoid using cartons that are too large. That seems like an obvious one, but unless you have a process in place to prevent it, how do you know that folks in your fulfillment center are not using cartons that are too large? The second one is avoid using too many cartons. So a lot of times what we hear is customers say, well, I won't get DIM because I try to use as many small cartons as I can. That might be the wrong message to send to your packers, because there's a minimum charge per package that you need to be concerned with. And again, unless you have processes in place, there's nothing to prevent it. Consider alternate carrier services. So if you look at UPS and FedEx Ground, they're 139 DIM divisor, but most of the regional carriers are around 166, or if they have any DIM divisor at all. So they're in sort of pre-2011 type of DIM factors. And of course, USPS doesn't have any DIM factors in zones up to zone 4, and then after zone 4 for priority packages, they're at 194. So they're well pre 2011. So if you're shipping to a local customer, it sometimes makes more sense to use an alternate carrier. The fourth tip is negotiate a more favorable DIM factor. Well, from what we gather from rate negotiators, contract negotiators, it is possible to negotiate a better DIM factor, a higher DIM factor. And the fifth is, which is the topic for today, is use cartonization technology to maximize transportation cost-effective packing. And I suppose I should mention that as we started to look into this, we realized pretty quickly that warehouse management systems, WMS systems, order management systems don't take transportation costs into account when they are putting together a pick list or packing instructions. They don't. They take into account labor, steps, where the items are in inventory, which is surprising, because as transportation costs are growing at least twice the rate of inflation. You would think that transportation costs would be on the front of everybody's mind, particularly where customers expect shipping for free. But they don't, and really they should, because as we'll see, the cost differences between packing good and packing great are pretty significant. So what is cartonization and how does it work? Well, if you think of cartonization technology in the same way that you might think of the game Tetris or really any other video game, the math that goes into video games like that is pretty amazing. It's all algorithms that are designed to manipulate objects in virtual space. And that's what cartonization does. It's like a video game, but instead of cars or random blocks, it is looking at dimensions of items and into virtual containers. And the algorithms can can find the most transportation cost-effective method within nanoseconds, literally nanoseconds, which is a lot faster than probably the decision making that the average packer can determine. So how it works is really a request is made to the cartonization engine, and in the request is a order SKU data, the line item data, including weights and dimensions of the items, container dimensions, the available containers and all their dimensions. So by the way, we call it cartonization, but the container could be a pallet, or it could be a truck, or any other container is the same difference. And then sending carrier options in a list of carriers that you want to be considered, as well as packing rules, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Based on that, the cartonization engine outputs the result, and the result is a diagram that shows how the carton or cartons should be packed, as well as what the cost would be by the carriers that were requested in the original request. So one of the things we realized that cartonization taught us actually was that if you take someone like FedEx, the way that you would cartonize an order, say shipping from Dallas, is actually different in terms of cost savings than if you were shipping it from Chicago. Everybody I've asked within the industry, I said, did you know that there's a bias in how cartons are configured as far as the carriers are concerned, and no one really knew it. And we only found out because we ran tests, but it's kind of interesting. So the kind of rules that you would pass in would be, what is the percentage fill? How much, you don't want to have no fill, but how much fill do you want to be considered? Do you want to pack an item alone? So if it's a hazardous material, do you want to have that packed with other items? Maybe not. So you would do a don't pack with flag. Or do you want to roll it? Is this material? Do you want to nest? If you have cones, do you want to lay flat? If it's a pallet, do you want to have an overhang? Weight distribution for other containers like trucking containers, and then warehouse pick location zones. So we'll take zones into account, but it will factor in the transportation cost potential as well. So based on that, it comes up with the best way to pack. So when you look at it, it's actually very complex to get to the right packing configuration at the right price. It takes intelligence, and unless you have Einstein on premise, it's really hard to do without a process. So with a process in place, cartonization can automate cost-effective packing decisions every time. So what we did is put together a few examples of, 3 examples of how cartonization impacts transportation costs. So the first example is a carton that's too large. So here we have a carton with items at the bottom, 1 box, 28 items. And if uncartonized, it would be $20.50. Cartonized, $14.06 for savings of $6.44. Now you may say to yourself, and this again was packed within 2 cartons, 2 boxes instead of 1, 2 smaller boxes instead of 1. You might say to yourself, well, obviously I wouldn't pack it in a big box like that. Well, I get boxes like that all the time, and during, the Christmas rush, when people are anxious to get things out the door, or, shippers are, pressed to get to ship orders. If getting sloppy about how you cartonize them can be very costly, as you see in this example. The next one is too many cartons. So in this case, I went the other direction. I said, okay, I'm going to pack this in 7 boxes, and the total cost of transportation cost is $49.21. But if I cartonized it, I can save $42 because one box could be could handle the number of items that I have for $7.03. Again, it may seem obvious to not put it in too many containers because of the minimum charge per container, but I guess the point is, how do you know? How do you know who's making the decision and why they're making the decision the way they have? The third one is to illustrates the value of dim rate shopping. So I'm looking at, in this case, actually, it's we used the use case of sneakers or shoes are notorious in terms of incurring dim fees, because there's no way to pack them that they won't have a dim fee just because of the nature of how they're configured. So in this case, I'm going to get dimmed, but I want to think in terms of, I want to determine what the best carrier is to use based on differential dim factors or dim divisors. So in this case, uncartonized, $21.09. Cartonized it, picked a different carrier, and saved $1. So 5%, which is not a whole lot, but it's better than a stick in the eye. And it just goes to show that with a little thought, you can you're automating it. You can the savings can be pretty substantial. So where would you actually apply cartonization controls? We think of it in for order entry, or in purchasing, or in sales, or shopping carts. You have the opportunity to quote charges that could be exactly what the charges will be once the packing actually occurs. We spoke with one of our clients who was faced with space-based rating, ABF freight LTL carrier, and shifted to a space-based rating, which is essentially dim factored rating. And he said it's really difficult to quote freight because I have to build the pallet, and by that time it's too late to actually quote it. So there's a case where upfront, instead of just guessing or using rules of thumb, which could have a pretty wide spread in terms of eventual cost, using a cartonization, you can instantly understand what the best way to ship it, as well as the best way to pack it, and provide customers with the right weight. Fulfillment and ship from store, of course, that's where you'd normally think of it. What you can do out of your WMS system or shipping system or order management system is ping the cartonization engine, and it will tell you, okay, well, here's how you should pack those orders, and it can provide a diagram which could be printed on the pick list, which would tell the packer, okay, here's the best way to pack this to minimize the amount of waste that is incurred at the lowest possible transportation cost. So what actions should you take in order to take advantage of cartonization? Well, the best place to look is really to look at your bills, and if you have a freight auditor, they can tell you pretty quickly how much you're spending in terms of DIM fees, unexpected DIM fees in particular. Based on that, you may be directed or may want to look at, inputting your dimensions and weights into your inventory or order management system or WMS system. Obviously, if you can negotiate out your DIM divisors or at least increase those divisors, it's an immediate savings. And, consider alternate carrier services or 3PLs who use maybe a DIM factor that's higher than, UPS or FedEx. And of course, add cartonization to your systems to, make decision-making processes as streamlined and as automated as possible. And of course, you may want to consider putting dimensional weighing devices in line, so you can kind of compare what you expected to pay when the order was taken versus what the actual weight is, and that will help you find areas where DIM factors or money is kind of leaking out the door. So a summary of the benefits: obviously, reduce shopping cart abandonment. So if you're quoting too high, customers may decide to abandon the shopping cart or not go further on your order entry process. If you quote too low, obviously you're losing money. More accurate quotes, it's better to be accurate with your clients so they know what to expect. You can reduce shipping costs, reduce packaging costs. If you don't have to use as much fill or you don't have to use larger containers, there's savings there as well. And obviously waste and improve customer satisfaction. I would add to this reduce damage. That's something that one of our customers have brought up as their biggest concern. So I hope this webinar has been helpful in really kind of understanding how important it is to have a cartonization process in place. And at this point, I think what I'll do is look to see if there are any questions. And one of the questions is, how difficult is it to integrate with other systems and implement the technology? It's not difficult. It's a pretty plain vanilla API. So if you have anybody who's technical at all and who are used to integrating with other websites or other systems, this is pretty straightforward. It's an XML request to an API, and it works pretty easily. Let's see if there's another question. Another question was, does the cartonization apply to trucking containers? And the answer to that is yes. I think I mentioned that a container is a container as far as the cartonization technology is concerned. The container could be a box, it could be a pallet, which it would be considered 48 by 48, or it could be a truck, so that you can determine how many trucks you need to order, so that you don't order too many to haul whatever it is that you're trying to ship. Have another one. Does this API support Canadian carriers? Yes, it does. We support Canada Post, Purelator, Cardinal, and a number of the regional carriers up there as well. Okay, any other questions? Can you show us how your product works? That's a great question. I haven't prepared a demo, but please contact us and we can take you through exactly how it works. What we're trying to do is talk more generally about the technology, but we'd love to show you how it works within the context of our solution. We have a a routing app, which would typically be used in purchasing or in order entry, where it looks at an order, breaks it down, and finds the best way to ship it, as well as it creates a diagram as to the best way to pack it. And I think that's it. Unless anybody has any other questions, we will wrap up. But I really want to thank everybody for attending, and hope we can see you during our next webinar. Take care, everybody. Thank you.